Jujuka to everybody, and here we are again. This is an episode about psychic detection, and I actually knew this guy Rob Cracknell that we're going to mention to some degree because I worked with him on an article for Paranormal Magazine. Absolutely amazing story. When the police investigation seemed impossible to solve and failed to make headway, who did detectives turn to? The answer may surprise you. Sometimes they turn to psychics. Police departments across the world regularly use psychics and clairvoyants to help clear up some of the most difficult investigations, although they do not always publicly acknowledge such tactics. They might give some piece of clothing to someone or take them to a site, or just get them into a room and let them just go into the zone. In some cases, psychics have cracked unsolvable crimes in minutes. It's been known for crimes to be foretold before they actually happen, much to the surprise and relief of law enforcement agencies. One such case involved a lady called Dorothy Nickerson, who lived in Arizona. While dreaming one day, November night in 1982, Dorothy had a vision of a robbery being committed by two men, one of whom wore a distinctive Mexican-style moustache. The next day, shaken by the strange dream, she realised that the robbery had shown her a real-life event which happened in a local store called Circle K. The vision also revealed a specific time, 12:15. Dorothy became convinced, as she recalled the details of the dream, that it was a warning of an impending robbery that would soon take place in the town. Should she ring the police and warn them? Eventually, Dorothy contacted the store owner, who listened and then hung up. Minutes later, the police contacted Dorothy to reassure her that her vision had been taken seriously by them and would be acted upon. As a result, a man sporting a Mexican-style moustache was arrested outside Circle K just after midnight carrying a gun. No trace was found of any accomplice. Dorothy Nickerson believed that if police had waited a few minutes later, at 12:15, as the dream had indicated, both men would have been arrested. Not everyone encounters such open-minded police officers. In 1977, the best-known psychic detective of them all, I think, is Robert Cracknell. I actually got to communicate with him. He was living in Cyprus at the time. He was from UK originally, and we did an article. Robert Cracknell received overwhelming impressions of a very serious crime, the rape and murder of an Australian backpacker, Janie Shepherd, whose body was found in her car on Wheat Hampstead Common, Hertfordshire. Quite near to London. The case became known as the Red Mini car murder. Cracknell, a tall, dark, tough-looking Londoner, has never contacted police himself. Rather, third parties have reported what he has received through his psychic channels, and then police have come back to him. In this case, he was talking to a journalist on another matter, and they discussed the Janie Shepherd case, the Red Mini murder. Cracknell mentioned he was surprised the police considered the victim as not being sexually active. Because Cracknell had overriding impression of a contraceptive coil lying on the back seat of the Mini, he told the journalist about this. The journalist relayed this unusual conversation to the investigating officers. The information about the contraceptive coil had been withheld from the public, which is common police practice, and was known only to those officers investigating the murder. So the officers' immediate conclusion that anyone with such information on the crime must surely be the killer. They were very suspicious of Cracknell, naturally. A telegram was dispatched by the journalist warning Cracknell that detectives were on their way to arrest him on suspicion of murder. Upon their arrival, the detectives' fears were soon allayed, because learning that Cracknell was well known as a psychic, instead of arresting him, they asked for his help. And it was a good job they did. In response, Cracknell told them that he had the psychic impression that the killer was a West Indian man with a scar on his face, on the cheek actually, who was already serving a prison sentence. Years later, a West Indian man with a scar on his face, on his cheek, was indeed charged with the Janie Shepherd murder upon his release from prison. Bob Cracknell later became involved in other high-profile criminal cases. Perhaps his most startling of predictions was that involving the Yorkshire Ripper, serial killer who stalked the north of England between 1975 to 1981. The Ripper's victims were women of all ages and walks of life, but many were prostitutes who were easy prey for such a killer. Detectives were convinced they were looking for a man from Sunderland in the north-east of England, and that accent from Newcastle, Sunderland way, is a very particular accent. You have to remember, it's not like other northern accents in England. Police have been hoaxed into believing that the killer was from Sunderland because somebody dropped a tape into a telephone box and calling themselves the Ripper, and for years they've been looking for someone from Sunderland. However, Cracknell, completely going against all known police theories, declared from his home in London to the Daily Mail newspaper that the killer was in fact from Bradford in Yorkshire. A totally different accent. The Yorkshire Post decided to follow up on the story because they recognised that Cracknell had accurately described in the past, various crimes, and he was able to describe the city's landmarks. So they invited to Bradford to have a look round. They took him on a spontaneous tour of the city, following his impression in and around Bradford. But at a crucial T-junction, he turned left instead of right. If he'd turned right that day, he would have been just a few hundred metres from the home of a certain Peter Sutcliffe, the man responsible for the Yorkshire Ripper murders. In a statement recorded for the Society of Psychic Research, on the insistence of author Colin Wilson, Robert Cracknell correctly foretold the exact nature of the arrest of the Yorkshire Ripper. He said the traffic police would stop a car and arrest a man without knowing the full import of their inquiry. Sutcliffe was indeed arrested by traffic police and later declared, while in custody, "You don't know whom you've arrested. I am the Ripper." Stunned, police had finally got their man. Dutch psychic Peter Hurkos was called upon by the police to help with the Bianca Tate murders in Hollywood. The killing spree was orchestrated by Charles Manson, and his followers, high on a cocktail of drug-induced fervour and pseudo-spiritual ramblings, attacked a number of people. Hurkos correctly picked up the name Charlie as the man responsible for the murders, but police later terminated Hurkos' involvement. Many questions have since hung over Hurkos and his credentials, but herein lies the essential problem of psychic detection. Who is to be believed and who is not? Charlatans and fame seekers could potentially waste time of the police and precious resources. So it's rather tricky. Perhaps one of the most famous for the British police was the involvement of a medium, Doris Stokes, whose descriptions and predictions of the Yorkshire Ripper were repeatedly published in banner headlines in the national tabloid. All of Stokes' predictions proved wrong, leaving many to question the wisdom of using psychics in police investigations. Not unreasonably, police officers felt they could be let down and be sent down the wrong path, and this would of course hinder rather than help investigation. One person who has a foot in both camps is Keith Charles, who's both a serving police officer and a practicing medium. His own cases of psychic detection include the hunt for the elusive playboy Lord Lucan, who went missing after attacking his nanny, Miss Ribbett, and seriously injuring his wife with a lead pipe. Charles, while on police duty one evening, went into a relaxed state as he picked up the words Lucan and Uckfield. That's a village in East Sussex in southern England. He then had a vision of a man dressed in a tweed jacket carrying a shotgun. Below him was the dead body secreted in a drain in the grounds of a large country house. His vision seemed to suggest someone had shot the aristocrat and hidden his bodies. Following up on this psychic vision, Officer Charles later found out Lord Lucan had a connection with the large country house in Gants Hill, and Gants Hill is quite near to all of that Uckfield area. So he went to Gants Hill, see if the house matched the one in his vision, but to his disappointment he discovered that the property had been demolished and new housing built in its place. The disappearance of Lord Lucan remains as mysterious as ever. Charles learnt that he did indeed visit Uckfield on the night of his disappearance. At 1:30 a.m. he was at the home of his friend Ian Maxwell, wife Susan Maxwell, but it was never seen alive again. One experienced detective with an open mind regarding the use of psychics is John Douglas, the father of behavioural science, criminal profiling. He's the founder of FBI Quantico, and I think there's been several films based on Douglas, basically. Silence of the Lambs, the Manhunter, that kind of thing. He's one of those profilers. The film Silence of the Lambs has a character in it, Detective Crawford, and that is based on John Douglas, apparently. So Douglas expressed his own views on the subject of using psychics. He said, I quote, "Psychics can, on occasion, be helpful to the criminal investigation. I've seen it work. Some of them have the ability to focus subconsciously on particular subtle details at a scene and draw logical conclusions from them, just as I try to do, and train people to do." But not everyone agrees. In Ontario, a police chief called Harold Graham, Provincial Police Commissioner for some 41 years standing, and he said publicly, "A psychic never, to my knowledge, solved a case." So obviously there's a clear disagreement on that, even within police circles. He intimated that the method was formulaic, using vague details to leap onto known clues, perhaps echoing a spectacular failure of high-profile Doris Stokes. It's difficult call for police officers, and there are high-stakes potential victims dangerous perpetrators to bring to justice. Comparison of psychic detectives and students' investigation of major crimes, which was a book compiled by Martin Reiser, director of Behavioral Sciences Services section of Los Angeles Police Department, concluded the system should be put in place to monitor the flow of data produced by a psychic, that the results can be objectified. In Los Angeles, a Celtic shaman called Bromley actually started working with the CIA, and he predicted that on the opening day of the Olympics, 20 people would be mowed down by a car. Bromley doesn't use airy-fairy speak. He is very specific in the language that he uses, almost corporate in a way. However, the best case is saved till last, and it's back to Bob Cracknell again. British #1 psychic detective. Although he's retired now in his dotage in Cyprus, he has the most sensational case of them all. It was the kidnapping of a millionaire's daughter, Gabby Meath, and in Switzerland, and she was taken for 6 months and hidden. It was a kind of criminal case where she was kidnapped. They wanted ransom. They'd been holding her for 6 months. It was getting desperate. Meath, a multi-millionaire, flew Cracknell in. He had gone into his zone and actually found a building on the map, and he said, "That's where she is." Well, the police stormed the place. They found evidence that Gabby had in fact been kept there, but only just left an hour before, 2 hours before. There was still sort of evidence that they'd been there, just left. And following this Ordnance Survey map around the area of Lake Como, they covered 20 miles, and he, Cracknell, pinpointed this small area on the map, and he then came to the conclusion that she had gone and that she would be released, and nobody believed it, and he was insistent on this. He uncovered a skirt, he was with the family, and he, in a flash of intuition, Cracknell, he just said, "Don't despair, she'll be returned on Friday, 5 days hence." As it turned out, for some reason the kidnappers released Gabby Meath, and there's photographs of him with the family drinking champagne. There's an actual photograph of Cracknell present when Gabby was found, and I think that's an incredible story, and he is the #1 genuine psychic detective. Okay, well, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again.